evening. Welcome to the Norwood Board of Education Committee Review Meeting for December 12, 2017. I'd like to call this meeting to order. All 5 board members are in attendance, along with Mr. Strasser and Dr. Sabo, our superintendent. Can I ask everyone to please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Our first item A is discussion items. Item A is our athletic handbook.
Thank you. I would like to bring this up as just a moment of discussion and just share with you. It's already loaded, our athletic handbook, on our website, but there are a few additions that we're proposing. You'll see that in your documents that we shared with you. One thing we wanted to add was that no coaches, volunteer, or school employee would transport students in their personal vehicles, of course, unless there was just an imminent danger, and that coaches will notify the athletic director in the event that a student would perhaps need to be transported. And there were a few other changes, additions that I wanted to just add, and that is any student who wishes to try out for a team must academically be eligible at the time of tryouts. Specifically, they would not have 2Fs. All students, athletes would turn in weekly grade sheets to administrators on the selected day, and then failure to turn in a grade sheet would result in missing a practice or game time for each day that the sheet is late. It was really our effort to focus on academics. We want them to get their high school diploma, and we also want them to participate in athletics also, but we want academics to be their primary focus. The other addition was that should they not have the grades needed, that they would be working to get those grades up. That would be held in a quiet environment where student athletes could complete their academic work, and that it would occur 3 times a week, such as a study table for 1 hour each session, and that their failure to participate in that would mean that they would miss practice, so they couldn't choose not to go to practice and then not go to the study table, because we know if we don't take care of the academics and they're not able to play anyway. So that was an addition. The last addition is when an athlete quits or is removed from a team or sport after the first contest, then or prior to the conclusion of the season, that student would not be able to participate in another athletic team during that same season. So those were the additions to the student athlete and parent handbook.
Corbin, get your jacket on.
I'd like to certainly propose. These were worked on at length by high school administration.
I know we don't have it in front of us. I did look at it, and there was a question I had on the part about coaches transporting.
Yes.
When I read it, it didn't make sense to me immediately, and I just wanted to understand. It was something about coaches will report if a child is transported or needs transportation or something.
Right, if there was a student in imminent danger for some reason, that they would then transport them. But otherwise, it's not permitted.
Okay. And any activity that's at Shea Stadium, we don't provide busing, correct?
We do not.
Walk.
Students are to walk.
Okay.
And actually, I think this is one of the things we're trying to avoid, certainly to limit our liability. We want students to walk. That's a healthy thing. We walk to school, so it's healthy for them to walk, particularly if they're an athlete. It certainly could be just part of, the exercise that would be required of them in any sport. But what we're saying loudly and clearly is that we do not want coaches, volunteers, anyone of this sort transporting our students.
Any questions or other discussion on that? Item B is our construction update.
We are moving right along. As you see, I've invited John Peter with us. He's our boots on the ground with the effort. We're here tonight, actually at this location, so that you can see the new entrance doors. And John, do you want to give us a bit of information on the door installation to date and then the punch list?
Sure. we've had quite a bit done since the last meeting. We've had the doors installed here, across the street at the primary, Williams Elementary, as well as the administration side doors are installed there, and the secondary set of doors at Norwood View. Unfortunately, in each situation, we've had the little hurdles that we're going through. We've got some caulking corrections to make around some of the frames. Some of the transaction windows need some work getting them to slide and operate a little better than they are right now. We had some doors where when the hinges were installed, the screws kind of came in a little bit of an angle and they kind of blew out the veneer a little bit. So between SHP, Dave Regal, and myself, we're all making lists of what all corrections need to be done. Most of the work has been done on days when students were not around. The day before Thanksgiving, then this past Friday. This Friday there was the frames installed on the doorways at the top of the stairs at Norwood Middle School. The doors themselves have not been installed, but the openings are there, the frames are there, they're ready just to begin accepting the doors. We've not really done too much at the high school yet as far as the doors are concerned. We were kind of hoping that the doors themselves at the middle school and the frame and doors at the high school would all take place over Christmas so that the access control would all be switched over from one software package to the other while nobody's really on any of the campuses, so we don't have a lot of confusion of which ones are going to work and which ones aren't going to work. So that's kind of where we stand with the front door projects.
Any questions for John or for me about just the first phase of construction, which is just the door entry? I've provided in your packet, but also in front of you, just a little bit bigger picture of the preliminary timeline. So as you can see, how ballot passes, finalize the schedule and construction methodology. Now if I could draw your attention to the very bottom of that sheet, there is pre-design, schematic design, and design development. So with phase 2 of our project, which moves us more looking at what I call the grand old lady on Sherman Avenue, which is the former high school and our present middle school. We're in the design development stage, and as you can see, when you look at Norwood Middle School, it appears we are about to, we're working on going out to bid in January. And as some of that conversation leads us to kind of working on those plans and, of course, monetarily deciding how we'll be spending the money, we're looking at roof access, a ladder to get up to the roof. Clearly, there will be quite a bit of mechanicals being stored and used on the roof for the new heating and air conditioning. A connecting corridor for the mechanical room below so that we could perhaps put in a new elevator. We also are looking at new toileting partitions, of course, new toilet facilities also, replacing all of the existing lighting, and new paint in the interior area except for the auditorium. Those are just some of the things, and as we go through the bidding process, we're learning more about how we would go about the work. For example, we know on the second and third floor of the west wing of the middle school, it's used for storage right now. There are some clubs in that area, but during the day it is not used, while the first floor is. So we're looking at how we could move students from one part of the building to another part of the building, or perhaps use what's inhabited now. They really want to start work, of course, after the bidding process. We would hope to start that work in May, at the latest in June, depending on how we move people around the building. And that will really be the challenge with phase 2 of the work. Even before we move out into the elementary buildings, because you can see from the timeline they intend for all 3 of the elementaries work to begin simultaneously. And so as we look at just the middle school, as you can see, that timeline of that work will begin for quite some time. You also see, when you look at the middle school, under design review, approvals, bidding, and construction, you see that last tab about moving the 6th grade up there. And I think with regard to construction, that was likely proposed. By the way, this is a timeline that was in place prior to my coming on board. So I'm presenting this to you just to share that I want to know, is that Is that something that we're doing just for construction, or perhaps we're just talking about construction at this point in time? I know as we go through the bidding process, we're considering when we make space at the elementaries for the work to actually be done, we will need to make room. And so that by moving groups of students to another building, that would allow for that. It's on the table when we have our construction meetings about is 3 rooms, which is the 6th grade at Norwood and the 6th grade at Sharpsburg, and then of course just 2 rooms at Williams. Is that enough? We know at least it's something at this point in time. Should we need more, we could consider perhaps trailers to, again, provide space in the building so that the work can be accomplished. We all know that timelines are just that, they're timelines, and oftentimes they're great efforts, but sometimes things don't go according to the timeline. So I suppose my question to you tonight is this a timeline that you agree with when it comes to the work at the middle school? Because that is where we are when it comes to budgeting and thinking about how budgets, some of the things we want to do, will impact us as we move forward.
I'm fine with that.
So I'm hearing, Scott, you say that temporarily for construction purposes, it's okay to move 6th grade in 2 years, according to this timeline.
When we talked, and I may be remembering incorrectly, but when we talked about moving them up there for space reasons for the elementaries. And I think we move them up and do it as a trial basis for construction purposes. We did talk about a couple things that were concerns. One, keeping them all on one level, one floor away from the general population of students, and maybe even staggering the start times so that they could get in and out without interacting with the high school too much at that time. If we move them up there and try it out, then I don't think we'll have the problems we've had in the past if we keep control of the buildings as we have so far. And if that's the case, then at that point we determine whether we want to move them back or leave them there and make it a true middle school.
I'm sure they'd be excited to be the first to have air conditioning. And they probably wouldn't want to stay at the elementaries to try to live through all of the construction, because we know that that can be truly challenging. What I want to be sensitive to, and that's certainly to our parents and to our students, because as you know, traditions are strong here in Norwood, and we love our traditions. We want to uphold those, especially the good ones. But we certainly, wouldn't want to share that, this is a permanent move if it's not. We want to share that this is based on construction, and then we'll reevaluate if that's truly the intent.
See, I thought that we had agreed that we were going to move the 6th graders to that level.
Okay.
We were still kind of on the bubble with 5th graders because we were really for 5th graders to allow more space in the elementary buildings and to utilize that building, because we have this huge space that is just really, really not being utilized. And we are hearing parents' concerns about being with the older kids, exposed to the older kids. Frankly, in the Catholic schools, the older kids are exposed to the younger kids, and it's a lot, from what I've seen, it's been very, very beneficial. You get the brothers and the sisters, and you get mentoring, and you have a lot of those things, and I think that is helpful. But, we're not doing it now, and it's a process, and we're going to have to make sure that our kids are, and our parents are comfortable with that. But I absolutely believe we should make it at least absolutely permanent for the 6th graders and consider 5th grade even at some point, because that building's just empty.
Right.
And we need to utilize, and we're jam-packed in our elementary buildings. So,
Right.
we need the space.
And this does impact what we're able to offer students at Norwood View. For example, we have preschool programming in Sharpsburg and even at Williams, but we don't have space for it at Norwood View. It would be wonderful if we could provide that, but we can't even discuss it because there's just no space. So
I think one of the things for me, because I heard both. We did talk about moving the 5th and 6th grade up, and it was potentially temporary, but then it also could be permanent. But if it were permanent, there were things that would happen within the middle school that would need to be part of the construction. So the cafeteria, we weren't able to handle that many more kids through the high school cafeteria. We could potentially have to open up one at the middle school or figure out something to be able to feed them. And then there was also, to Scott's point, like, do we design the building or create a section for these students so that they were more separate? And that all had implications with the construction.
Right.
So whether or not it's like temporary or permanent, I think we would approach it differently with either one of those mindsets.
That's a good point, and I think that will help us in our planning moving forward. So to hear you say that, at least for construction purposes, it's certainly feasible as possible, and likely, I'm telling you, it's necessary to alleviate space at the elementaries. And you can, of course, see from this timeline that there's time to plan for that and to do it extraordinarily well. And we have a fantastic administrative team that I think will provide that very support to our families and to our students to ensure a seamless transition. Middle school, we're already really good at transitions, but give it another opportunity. Okay, thank you for your feedback. I appreciate that.
Item C is the athletic MOU.
I thought I might have an MOU for you, but perhaps it may show up before on our agenda for our next meeting. What I learned is a couple things. We did agree with NTA on our supplemental schedule. What I learned was that, I believe it was in July, our athletic director and former superintendent had discussed adding 9th grade freshman basketball for girls. And of course, as you know, we're in a new league. There are no 9th grade girl basketball teams in our new league. But we thought that the program was growing and that we were going to work to that end. So they had put in place a coach to actually do that work. And what's challenging now is that coach has stayed on. And as you know, with the number of slots on our supplemental, there was no way to pay that person. And so I've talked with our athletic director as well as our present girls basketball coach. And so we're working to add that team on, and at least at this point in time, if the NTA elects to add that as an MOU and we agree to it, then of course I'll have a way to pay this person. And then the other part to that would be that they would know going into next season, they wouldn't have to cut teams or students from that team. And then two, we could work on a schedule. Right now, they know that they could get together about 5 teams to play. Of course, they're not in our league. So that doesn't help us for right now. But I expect an MOU at some point because you can't just make up an amount and pay people because they say they've been there. I will say it does represent the basketball boys team. So a lot of people would look at boys and girls basketball and think, oh, Title IX, you want to do the exact same that you do for boys as you do for girls. But Title IX really just expects that we are certainly cognitive about as we go through our work, make sure that we afford the same opportunities or like opportunities to our girls. So it's not an obligation under Title IX. It is our obligation to review it. So of course that amount proposed would be the exact same as the boys' amount of freshman coaching.
Is that provided if we have enough girls for the team? I mean, if we don't, then we're not going to do that.
Say that again?
I know in the past, like if they didn't have enough people for the team, they also didn't have a team. So then the coach's position is just...
That's exactly right. And so that clarity will need to come from me to our athletic director, because that is exactly on the table. That just because we have a slot for it doesn't mean we hire someone for it if there is no team. You're exactly right. Yeah, that needs to be made very clear.
And then item D are to set dates for meetings. Imagining these are, if January, correct? So you're looking for dates from the group?
I want to do that committee or have a special meeting, organizational meeting.
I think we just use it right before, we usually do it right before the committee meeting.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
And that meeting will be held in Norwood.
That's January 9th. Or and it just starts at 5:30.
It's 5:30, I think, is what we've always done, and just continuously run the meetings.
So that would be what, January 9th?
And then the item E, the president pro tem, we do that at our December meeting, or do we do that now?
I think you will do that in your December meeting.
Right. Right, so on the 21st.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. All right, and then this starts our actual overview of the items we will have for next Thursday's meeting. So it doesn't look like there are any field trips under item 1, the Education Committee. Item 2, there are a few for personnel. I don't know if you have anything to go over.
There are, just, of course, you see under number 1, a resignation. I'd just like to point out Mr. Alsip is going to start his student teaching in another school district, so of course that's why he needed to leave. You see classified sublist, student and education aid, and of course you see contracts, supplemental contracts for athletics. You see a volunteer coach. And then we move to people activity contracts, volunteer coaches, avenues for success, a change in status, a correction to the agenda. And this is a correction because these folks are mentoring 2 people. So that's why it's changed from one FTE to 2.
And all these individuals have all their paperwork completed.
Yes, they do. So when I bring names to you, they will, they can't get on the agenda until they, 1, fit a slot, and 2, have all of their paperwork in.
Thank you. All right, and Scott, you've been busy. Policy Committee.
You would think I've been busy, but I've been busy at work, so I haven't had a chance to dig into them. So I'm going to put Chris on the spot and ask her if she can give us an update.
I thought that might be the case. It's a busy time. So we do have a slew of them, but a lot of them are just small changes. The first one is our non-discrimination policy. We already had a policy in place. This, it added some verbiage to make it a tad more deliberate, and they have changed some of the wording of they used just being stronger, and they're saying that it's prohibited, there's no wishy-washiness. They've just tightened the policy, I guess is the better way to say it, to be very clear about a school district's stance on any kind of discrimination, that it's just simply not tolerated. They changed some verbiage about calling the person that might bring something forth. They were originally called the charging party, and they were simply called the reporting party. So you can tell that they've softened some terminology and tightened some other part. So it's not different from where we were before, but again, just a tightening. There were some dates in place that were in there, but you had these things in a certain amount of time, and they have opened that up to as soon as possible. So again, they've just changed it, some of the verbiage. So we have a policy on that, and then of course we have the corresponding regulation, and the regulation simply adds more detail to it. Again, talking about just tightening up how we communicate with the reporting party, and just specifically what the district would do if we had a complaint coming forward. Again, nothing new, just a tightening. The Also, the grievance procedure is really a procedure that we've had in place. Again, just a name of, instead of using the alleged harasser, it's called the responding party. So again, terminology. So all of those, there's also an administrator follow-up. So there's a form for administration to follow up with the complaint that comes forward. And it's not required, but we are keeping ours in place. We're allowed to keep it in place. And we just thought we might as well keep this paper trail. And we know it's important to document. And we would have documented anyway, but this just allows us to use an existing form. So those are 4 different either policies or regulations or forms that all deal with the same thing. The next policy is about broadcasting, taping of board meetings, and you're already all ahead of the game. Again, it just says that if someone's interested in taking photographs or broadcasting of a meeting, they should notify the board. It used to read that they must notify the board. In this day and age, that's a tad outdated, quite frankly. And I think from now on, Dr. Sabo might be announcing, you're all welcome to take pictures of your children coming forward, all that natural things that occur during board meetings. So before they were supposed to tell you, it was a must notify, and that didn't happen, but this just allows certainly taping. And the interest from the law is just to continue to have this open, transparent documentation of meetings that you already do. So that's good. The next thing is federal grants. So there are a couple policies on federal grants. Some of them are very small changes. In this first policy, it's just changing the name of the office. It used to be the U.S. Office of Budget and Management, and now it's Management of Budget. I know it's shocking, but nonetheless, it will carry through all of the federal policies from now on. So that first policy on administrating federal grants isn't really different, just that small change. Fiscal reporting for us is, again, the main change of that. Everything else remains the same for fiscal reporting, just going to the Office of Management and Budget. Purchasing procedures, they remain the same as well, but our regulation changed slightly, and Mr. Strasser added some deliberate procedures to make things clear about how we purchase things. And just simply more detail. So if you had a chance to look through it, you will see that there's some more deliberate steps about what's required when people make purchases. Just to clear up any confusion, and if people have confusions in mid-year, they can refer to our regulations and our policies. So it just tightens that up so that we're all on the same page with that. Because we are a district with a lot of people that might need to make a requisition, and we want them to do it right so we don't have to make changes in mid-flight. The next thing is about school properties disposal. So this talks about, we've always had a properties disposal policy. This is no different, but it does allow for the addition of STEM and STEAM schools, so that's the addition. We've always been required to offer real estate to community schools and to college preparatory boarding schools, but the STEAM and STEM schools are an additional component that we've never been asked to do before. And STEAM stands for that science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, and STEAM adds those parts, but also the arts. So there are some pop-up schools that represent that. We don't currently have any in Norwood, but in other districts, they may, and this is required. Next is transportation services, and this is an easy one for us because we have a big clause in there that the district contracts out for transportation services, so that won't change. The only addition is adding the STEAM schools. STEM schools were already accounted for, but not the STEAM, which includes the art schools. Next on our list are the gifted programs. We had just recently adopted a gifted policy, and there's one very, very slight change, and it's just kind of almost a grammatic change in this policy. Before our big chart that we have in the policy, we just outlined in more detail what's in the chart. So nothing new. You had already approved it. I believe this one I know, August. So it was a quick turnaround. So there's just one slight change in that one. The next one is English language or English learners. The only change in the English learner policy is when students were new to the country, we always had given them a year before they were asked to take their reading assessment. That is no longer allowed. So even if I come from a different country, within that first 180 days, if there is a state assessment, I'll be required to take that assessment. It won't count towards me as a student. It's considered baseline data unless I am a high school student and I'm working towards those 18 graduation points, then it will count towards me. But it is a new part of the revised code that we just simply have to honor.
And when you say count towards you, is it count towards the school?
For end of course exams, yes, it would count towards the school.
So it goes into the calculation at the end for the school,
for
it
the
just
school.
isn't, okay.
Yeah. That, English learners is always a hot topic that people change their minds about, so probably look for more changes around that because we haven't found our way as a state, how to take care of people that come new to the country and how to meet all our own regulations and take care of them as people. So they're going to keep changing it, but for right now, they will test and it won't count for them unless they're in high school.
And the test is only offered in English, correct?
The reading test is only offered in English. Math, science, and social studies for the high school would be offered in a different language. So we are allowed to translate that, but you're not allowed to translate the reading test into a different language. So that's a good question, though. And people ask me that all the time. Can't we please? Because it makes sense, but it is a reading test. The next one talks about co-curricular and extracurricular activities. And this simply adds STEAM. STEM had already been added. So students that are part of a STEM school can participate in co-curricular and extracurricular activities, but also students in a STEAM school can now participate. Interscholastic athletics will be the same thing. It will be dealing with the additional STEAM, so that will be an easy change. Truancy, we just adopted this truancy policy, and there was simply an error on page 2. Not our error, but something that OSBA noted. Parents have to be notified if a student is with or without an excuse for 38 or more hours, and the policy had only read without an excuse, but it's both. So if a student is out of school for 38 or more hours, the parents have to be notified, even if they wrote the excuse for them to miss school for some reason. So that's a change in that. And the last one was just a kind of a recap of that broadcasting, because there were 2 broadcasting. They're kind of a duplicate, but in different parts of your policy book. And that takes care of that.
That concludes my report.
Thank
That was
you.
a good report, Mr. Proctor.
That is a lot. All right, thank you. All right, the last part is our Buildings and Grounds Committee report. Mr. Bryant.
Yes, we've got 2 requests right now. We've got the city of Norwood requesting the middle school auditorium for their inauguration for the city officers on January 1st. And Norwood marching band for Shea Stadium on November 3rd for band competition.
Goodness, far away. Early. Great, thank you. And then item 5 is our financial committee report. Mr. Miracle.
Let's see what we have. Financial reports. A, the grant, $11,250. And then I think Mr. Strausser included this in an email that we read, the approval and updated depository agreement with PNC Bank, and approval of new study life account, life skills at high school.
Mr. Miracle, we may have a couple more grants to add for our regular meeting, so we'll get those out as part of the regular agenda. We'll also have updated ABSOM. The bank reconciliation is sent out as part of the treasurer's report, and we could also have a few transfers to add that we'll need to get on there before January, so we'll ask for those in the December 21st meeting. I did also send you the treasurer's report yesterday. Didn't get that out with the agenda. Apologize for that. But a little bit of good news there in terms of valuations. And Norwood actually was another treasurer in the county had put together a summary of all the schools in the county, and Norwood was actually number 2 in terms of property growth this year, skewed a little bit by the Rookwood sale, so that helped a little bit on that. But that's still, as I mentioned to you, that's good news economically, and we're happy about that.
Very good. All right, that's the last item on our committee agenda. And then our special board meeting, we had 6:30, correct? Okay, so we'll have to wait until 6:30 to start the second portion of our meeting.